The present simple tense is the easiest to form and use of all English tenses, and is one of the most commonly used. It's one of the most important English tenses and should be the first to be studied. Here are some examples of the present simple in use. I work in a factory. You have a new car. He steals our newspaper. We take our breaks together. They scare the ducks. There are several different ways that we use the present simple tense in English. The broad categories are habitual, stative, and arrangement. The present simple tense is most frequently used for an action that takes place regularly. This means that the action happens often enough to be considered normal. It could be a habit or a generalization. It doesn't necessarily mean that it happens constantly or even that it's happening now. This timeline diagram demonstrates the habitual use of the present simple. The X's are spread out in the past, the present, and the future. This shows that the action happens regularly and at all times. For example, I walk to work. I would say this if I usually or often walk to work. Grandpa takes the bus. We make cookies all the time. Again, this is something that is done regularly. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that we're literally always making cookies. My cats wake me up in the morning. Squirrels hide nuts for the winter. We use the present simple for this last example because it happens every year, which is regularly. It's also an example of the next use of the present simple. Another very common reason to use the present simple tense is when stating a fact or describing something. If a statement is true right now or in general, you can use the present simple to say it. This is different from the habitual because it doesn't describe an action, it describes a fact. This diagram illustrates the stative use of the present simple. The line goes through the past and the present and the future because the fact is something that is true around now. It was true in the past, although perhaps only in the recent past, and it will be true in the future, at least for some time, maybe forever. For example, I like sugar in my coffee. I say this because it's generally true. I usually take sugar in my coffee. You smell bad. You would use present simple for this because you're describing how something is, its state. My car runs perfectly. We have some milk. You get into trouble a lot. This sentence refers to the general state that you're in trouble a lot, not the individual times that you're in trouble. Arrangement. This one is a little bit different. An important use of the present simple tense is in stating a single action that's been arranged in advance. In this case, you're actually saying that an event happens in the future. The present simple tense never refers to a single action unless it's in the future. When using the present simple to show a future arrangement, you have to include some kind of time reference. For example, I pick her up tonight at 7. What you mean is that you're going to pick her up at 7. But since it's arranged in advance, we can use the present simple. Evelyn has her interview next week. We sign the contract tomorrow. Today we close for the last time. Notice that even though this sentence says today, it means later today. So you see that the present simple is sometimes used to express a future action. The same thing happens with the present continuous. This is a significant point about English tenses. Each tense is really a structure, a combination of a certain spelling of a verb, a principal part, with a certain set of auxiliary verbs. They have a primary use, but their actual uses are not restricted to what their name implies. We just have to learn what each tense is used for. These categories are not sharply defined. There are plenty of examples that fit into more than one category. We have them just to help you decide when to use the present simple. Don't worry about figuring out which category a sentence goes in. The primary use of the present simple is to state facts, which can be as general as dogs are mammals, or as specific as I feel sick. To recap, the present simple tense is used to communicate action which happens regularly, or to talk about general facts, or the state of things, and to communicate things which are arranged in the future. So we've talked about when to use the present simple. Now let's talk about how to use it. The present simple usually just uses the base form of the verb. For example, I like ice cream. I take a shortcut. We go for a hike on Saturdays. You walk funny. Trucks drive down our road. The main exception is when you use a verb in the third person singular. That means that the subject of the verb, which is the person or the thing doing the action of the verb, is a single entity that isn't the person speaking or the one being spoken to. In this case, you have to add an S sound to the end of the word. It's called the third person singular S form. For example, she works really hard. Bob lives in Ireland. That hurts. He makes me laugh. The shop closes at 7. For more about how to form the principal parts of a verb, including the third person singular S form and other forms, watch our video on principal parts. So far, all these sentences have been positive statements. That is, they are saying that something is true or that something happens. If we want to say that something is false, we must use the negative structure. For example, I do not like strawberries. In this case, we use an auxiliary verb, the verb to do. The auxiliary verb and the word not come right after the subject of the main verb in a negative statement. The do and not are often contracted into the word don't. Here are some more examples. You do not know how to drive. You don't look tired. We don't have bread. They do not like us. If you want to ask a question, we use the question structure. It uses the same auxiliary verb to do, but the auxiliary verb comes right before the subject. Do you want another apple? Do you have a mobile phone? Do we go this way? Do they take credit cards? To see more about the different structures for using verbs, watch our video about verb structures. You can also use an auxiliary verb with the present simple in a positive statement to show emphasis. This usually means focusing on the fact really happens, or that it really is the subject who's doing the action of the verb. For example, I do like strawberries. You do speak English. She does walk by herself. Pancakes do taste good. Notice the verb does in the example, she does walk by herself. Does is the third person singular S form of the auxiliary verb to do. For more information and examples about auxiliary verbs and irregular verbs, or to see a list of the most common irregular verbs, click on one of these links. So that's the present simple tense. The two most important things to remember are the third person singular S form and that you sometimes don't need to use the auxiliary verb. The present simple tense is used quite a lot and it's very easy to form, but there are a lot of different situations where you can use it. So being familiar with it and knowing how to use it will serve you well in a variety of situations. Thanks for watching and I hope you found this useful. Remember, you can book a class via Skype with me or one of our other teachers by visiting our website. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook.